I'm Phyllis L, and I served on the Seattle City Council from 1967 to 1978.
Were people content with the West Seattle Bridge as it was, or did they want something different?
They wanted an improved throughway from West Seattle, connection from West Seattle to the rest of the city. And my interest in it was I was working very diligently with the port. I was at that point, at the time of the election, serving as a chair of a new committee that the council set up on intergovernmental relations. So I was working with the port pretty seriously, trying to find a way for the port to expand up the Duwamish. And the bottleneck in that scheme was the bridge. So I worked with the port, with other federal officials and others, and the community to say, how can we improve this situation? So I did many things. I took the community leaders, walked through underneath to see where the bridge could be sited on the west side. I took elected officials, including state and federal, of the Duwamish, to show them what the potential was and what the bottleneck was, because that channel was that opening was so narrow that the ships were in jeopardy every time they tried to go up. So it was not possible to expand cargo deliveries up the Duwamish. We even had notions of taking Boeing fuselages up there by scow to have another way of accessing that workplace. And it wasn't only the opening of the channel, but it was also the shape of it, because it was very narrow at the bottom, and that caused the ships to wiggle going through, and so it is inevitable that there was going to be a crash. I took Scoop Jackson, I took Paul Wyatrack, who was a city engineer, I took port officials, Eldon Alpheim when he was chair of the Port Commission, and Merle Adlam and others. And we had a consensus, yes, this was something that was not just important to the future of the city and its seaport, but also to the people of West Seattle, who were certainly going to suffer if that bridge suddenly disappeared. So we had, and I was also the vice chair of Forward Thrust at the time, and knew that this was part of the recommendation for transportation improvement. So everything, the stars were aligned, but we had to have an election in order to get the funds to start. And I was very active in that election. And as I recall, the bond issue was for $37 million, and the bids came in at 51. We didn't have the insight to consider councilmanic bonds to make up the difference, a concept which John Spellman used subsequently on the Kingdom. It would have been far better, an earlier solution. And the design was a cable stay bridge. It was a gorgeous design. We went, stored all the material, kept the vigil, and after I left the council, my colleague, Jeanette Williams, carried the ball to the feds. But I think about it a lot. And one of the stumbling blocks was a scandal of sorts about the closeness of the city engineer to the contractor. And although they drew me into it because I was obviously the most active proponent and lobbyer for the bridge, but I was not any part of that tawdry part of the history. It just shows how creative you have to be, how dogged you have to be, and how right you have to be in order to carry off one of these major improvements. I will always remember, I think the relationship within the community was amazing because they all got behind it. They were all good rooters. They all entered into the many trips we took up and down the Duwamish. They were determined to have that bridge, and thank God they did. One humorous note is the night that the Chavez hit the bridge, the city engineer called me, and he said, "Phyllis, were you on the bridge the night the Chavez hit the wall?" He always accused me of being willing to distract the captain at just the right time to have the crash take place and the emergency come forth. So that was at least one comical part of this story.
What was it like to live in West Seattle with that bridge?
Well, you know, with bridges, you got to get used to them because they aren't going to go away just by will. So there were backups, no doubt. But we didn't have the population in West Seattle that we have now. We knew it was coming because that was the whole idea about forward thrust. Let's get ready for the next generation to come to Seattle. And so by and large, West Seattleites are patient. They deal with reality with some patience. So it was a frequent disturbance from that bridge. But the passages were not all that frequent either. And that's what we were trying to improve.
And finally, I know you have some mixed feelings about the current high-level bridge. Describe your mixed feelings about it and in the context of the potential of what it could have become.
Well, I fell in love with the design of the cable stay. And plus the fact it had a slight curve to it, had a curve on the roadbed, and it had those cables, sort of a sculpture in the sky. And we had hoped to have a signature bridge that would be not totally unique, but certainly an unusual form. And I still look at that and kind of envision what it could have been. Obviously, I was thrilled to have the challenge met and the bridge built because it was significant in a lot of ways. And so you don't spend too much time worrying about what might have been.